So the thing with being a musician and deciding to take up this career without having someone like a guiding figure, like the one true professional musician that you just kind of can ask questions and follow and learn a lot from. Like I had some people, like many people maybe, who I borrowed things from. That, from this bass teacher I would borrow this ethic, and from this uh, business person I would borrow this ethic, and I would combine it all. But there was no one answer, and I don't think there can be one answer in life also, like a one person who answers everything. If you get something like that, you're very, very lucky. Hold on to that. But the idea behind this podcast is to help musicians. Like always, I've been doing this for about 12 years, maybe 13. I think at 17 I was out of school, and every single penny that I've made since then, it's from making music. So I just know a little bit about it. I am not saying that I am the master of music, but I can say I can show you how to survive. So yeah, if you're looking to master music and become a virtuoso, I am not talking about that. There's a lot of content for that out there already, and you should be checking out those virtuosos with their master classes for that stuff. I'm just gonna show you how you can probably pay your bills this month and the next month, and eventually not have to worry about paying your bills. So that's the idea. This third podcast is about making money. What I've realized over 12 years, because or 13 years, is that um, I usually love to go by what feels good, what my body and my mind and my soul is telling me to do. So if I feel that I should teach, then I would teach a lot more. I would start pivoting and centering my life around teaching music. And then after a couple of years, maybe 3 years, I start to feel that maybe students are not as serious as I thought they would need to be, or they're not as grateful, or it's not feeling as rewarding of a process. There may be some stuff that comes in the way, maybe the admin stuff. Maybe you have a boss at where you teach, maybe you have a boss who's annoying, who makes it a pain for you. Same thing can happen with gigging. Let's say you want to focus on gigging because that gives you energy, and playing a show makes you happy, and there's a happy audience and there's money. And then something turns you away from that eventually. Maybe it's tiring, maybe it's too much traveling, maybe it's the same songs every day. Maybe you again have a manager or a boss who makes this a pain in your life. So it could be anything, but I've always gone with my feeling. I do what my body and my mind and my being tells me to push more in that direction, to push more towards shows, to push more towards teaching. But what I've now realized is that it's best to tame that mind. It's best to really learn to have clarity and wisdom to be able to question these feelings and be able to manage them. I'm not saying that the feelings are not important, the feelings are very, very important, but manage them, because here's what I'm gonna get to. The main premise of this podcast is that maybe, and something like coronavirus is teaching us, that do not put your eggs in one basket, which is like a obvious saying. Everyone knows that word. What does it mean as a musician? That right now, I wish that I had not let go of all my students over the last 12 years. If I had stayed in touch with them, or in fact, I am in touch with most of my students, but if I had kept teaching them or kept adding on more students, that means, let's say I want to earn 1 lakh rupees a month, and 20% of it I wanted to come from teaching, 20 to 25% of it. So I need to teach 25 classes at 1000 rupees per 45-minute or 1 hour session. That is up to you. You can start to teach for 12-hour session, you can start to teach for 15-hour, even 2000 per hour. Depends on your expertise and the city you live in and the clientele you have. But you can make anywhere between 500 rupees to 2000 rupees an hour in India as a teacher. You might even be able to do more or less, that depends on you, but this would be the big broad range of making money as a teacher. But I would say that keeping 20% to 25% of your earning through teaching would be a steady constant. The thing and the problem with teaching is that it might be a little bit cyclic. That means if all your students are school students, then in March they will, or Feb or Jan, they may drop out because they have exams coming up, and they also have mid-year exams at some point in the year. I do not know if it's September or whenever it is. So you know their patterns, that you might get more students who are kids in summers and they drop out. So that was my beef with teaching, that I did not like inconsistent students, and there were more inconsistent students than consistent students. But ideally, this is what I would do. If you're making notes, I would say try and get 20 to 25% of your life from teaching, money life from teaching, 30% maybe even. It depends on you. For me, anything more than that did not feel like a balance that was leading towards growth. Then it was more like teaching had turned into a job. I always want to be excited about teaching. I don't want it to be a thing that I just do hour after hour after hour with no passion, life, and love and interest behind it. So I want to be excited about every class I teach. So that's why I only want to teach 20 to 25 classes a month, which means I only want to teach 5 classes a week or something around that. Now, you can scale this however you see fit. You could try and do 10 classes a week, whatever you like. Find your balance. But remember, your body and your brain and your mind will tell you. And if you're doing it just for the money and you're not doing it for joy of teaching, then you're probably not in the right space. You need to do something else for a while and think about teaching later. And if you're just teaching, anyways, I'm done. I won't talk about this more. So number one is teaching. The number two is gigging. So finding shows. There are two or maybe three broad categories of shows. One would be what I would call low paying shows, which would be like bars in Delhi, or Bombay, which are like the local venues, and you have indie bands that play there. They do not have, maybe they don't have as much the kind of ticket sales that like a private event has, because that's a different purpose. But low paying would be this, like bars and gigs. And then high paying would be private gigs, like wedding gigs or corporate gigs for like like events for bigger companies like Microsoft or whatever. So you're doing, if you're playing like, let's say, a launch of a car or a fashion event, that might pay much more per gig than the bar gig. But playing the bar gig gives you visibility. So within the gigging spectrum, we can do a whole podcast on gigging some other day, on how to get gigs. It's actually much more simpler than most people think. But yeah, how to get gigs is a different topic. We will, now I'm just going to write this down, and how to get gigs is going to be another thing, another podcast. I'm going to put this down, and that might be podcast 5, because podcast 4 is the most important thing that you need to have as a musician. That's ear training, or ears. It's, ears are more important than gear. Ears are more important than network. Ears are more important than your knowledge. Ears are more important than your skills and everything. Ears are more important than everything else. So I want to talk about that in the next podcast. But the fifth podcast could be how to get gigs, which is live playing gigs, and we'll get into production gigs at some other time. So the second aspect of your money is and performance and being a professional. It's not just about money, it's also being like continuously putting yourself out there to be considered to be a true professional, is gigs. So ideally, in my world, I would want something like maybe 40 to 50% of my income to come from gigs. So 20-25% comes from teaching, which is like a slightly lower number. So I'm happy if 20% of my money comes from teaching and 40% of my money comes from gigging. Gigging has been a mainstay for me for a while. So for 5 years, maybe I was just teaching, but for maybe 5 or 6 years, I was just gigging. I've spent more time playing shows and surviving as a live touring musician much more than anything else in my life. I can move to another city, and I know what to do to quickly start getting gigs and to start playing shows and start paying rent and start making my money. That's what I could do easily when I was in Bombay. I won't say it was easy that I was reaching my goal of 1 lakh rupees a month, but I was able to score a Bollywood show or shows with other indie artists within a week of reaching Bombay. So that is the fifth podcast that we're talking about. How to do that is the thing. But okay, 40% of your money, I would like 40% of my money to come from shows. Not anymore. Now I'm not a gigging musician. I like to run my studio and produce. Uh, I have a different aim now. So maybe I can talk about my aim in another podcast. Let's put that aside. So as a average Delhi musician or as an average musician in maybe Bombay, anywhere, this would be great. 40% of it comes from gigging, 50% of it maybe comes from gigging. So you're already reaching 70% of your income target. Okay, I'm gonna cut this up in two podcasts. So I'm gonna talk about the most important 30% of your income in the next part of this. So that's gonna be part three, podcast three, part two. All right, guys, just grab that podcast as soon as you can.